Welcome to Open Comments with myself, Ash.
And me, Oliver.
And me, Irene.
A show that opens a conversation onto career advice, career journeys, lifelong learning, and more. Through this innovative podcast, we'll be offering insightful dialogues with an equal mix of humour and candour. Join us as we embark on an engaging conversational journey with a diverse set of guests from different walks of life. We hope you enjoy our show and look forward to bringing more topics into the fold for you through each episode.
At the time of recording, we're currently in the Open Group Summit in Houston, Texas, and we have our special guest with us today, Steve Caton. And Steve is the Chief Investment Officer and Partner at Caton Partners. Over the last 3.5 decades, Steve has served as a reliable, service-minded resource to over 150 business owners, whether helping the small husband and wife team operating a beauty salon or large corporations with thousands of employees. He approaches each client with humble professionalism and servitude. Likewise, Steve is active in his community, volunteering with the Houston Food Bank, St. Vincent de Paul Society, Habitat for Humanity and Kiwanis Club, as well as hosting CPA continuing education programs for over 30 years. A native Houstonian, Steve graduated from the University of Houston with a BS in Hotel and Restaurant Management. He and his wife Shelley have 2 boys, Kyle and Riley, and in his spare time enjoys travel, golf, skiing, history, and is an avid sports fan. So Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us.
You bet. Glad to be here.
So Steve, tell us more about your journey from receiving your degree in hotel and restaurant management to becoming a CPA and serving businesses.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm not a CPA actually. I'm a certified financial planner, CFP, but we gave continuing education courses to CPAs as part of their continuing learning.
I grew up in a very modest home. There was never a lack of love, but there was a lack of money. My parents did not make a lot when we were growing up and definitely didn't spend a lot. I can even remember times when we would share 1 box of Kraft macaroni and cheese among the 6 of us as part of the meal, and we shared 1 bathroom. But growing up this way, I adopted some incredible values from my parents. They instilled patience and perseverance in all of us, and I'm so grateful. And so years later, after I got into this industry, I was 26 years old and my dad died in a terrible accident. And this was a devastating blow to our family and a difficult time. But aside from mourning the loss of our father, what made things even more difficult was the uncertainty of the future and the planning that could have been better. And someone had to help put the pieces together while we were all mourning the loss of our father. But if there was one great thing that came from my dad's passing was that I realized I needed to step up, take responsibility, take a stand for my family and for the families I served. And from that moment on, I was committed to making sure that any family we serve will be as prepared as possible for whatever curveballs life throws at them. And I believe every family deserves someone to take a stand for them, who assumes responsibility to be a leader and an anchor for them in times of chaos. Then, after working my way up in the industry for years, I started to believe more in the philosophy of being a true fiduciary to the client instead of owing loyalty to both the client and the corporate giant we represented. And so in the 2020 COVID chaos, we realized we could do this work more efficiently and effectively on our own, more closely tied to what we believe in, rather than what the large corporation was dictating to us. So that's how and why Patron Partners exist today, because we believe being a patron is to be a supporter, an encourager, a steward, a leader. Wealth management is what we do, but bringing wealth to life with peace and purpose is who we are.
Did COVID have any implications on starting the business? Did you? I'm assuming you must have struggled to get clients at the start, or did you take some with you?
Well, yeah, certainly during that time there was a lot less communication in person, and so making that transition into using other technology and so forth to get in touch with folks was part of that equation. But we had already had established quite a following up to that point, so quite a few of the folks came with us and made the transition a little bit easier. But still, it's a much different owning your own business than working for a large corporation. And so we're continuing now 3 years in to continue to learn how to adapt to that environment.
And going back a little bit, when you spoke earlier about where you went to university, did you always know what you wanted to do? Was it a particular subject that you were really interested in at school and you thought, well, I want to go down this route? Or is it a conversation that you might have had with someone? Or did you always just have that, at the back of your mind that I want to do something in this field?
It really started with my parents, I think, early on. I think that I was encouraged to explore everything, and my father told me that by the time you're 30 years old, you're probably going to change jobs or careers 3 times anyway on average. So don't worry about it too much. Just jump in there, and then you'll figure out the next step. But along that way, he really was instrumental in helping me get into the financial service industry. I was going to become a lawyer like he was, but after further analysis of strengths and weaknesses and what might be more appealing to me in the long run, that's how I eventually found my way into the financial services industry. I remember early on, high school, though, before college, I was seeing that on Time magazine had a cover of how jobs were going to be scarce in a lot of industries, but the hotel and restaurant industry was going to be booming. So that appealed to me at first, and so that's where I started. But while I was doing that, that's where I become more interested in law or in finance.
And did you have any teachers during that time that really inspired you, that you kind of, thought you liked what they were saying or how they carried themselves or?
Oh, absolutely. And of course, that's what appealed to me to go into the legal field with my father's being a lawyer. And so that appealed to me at first. But then also, he introduced me to a couple of folks that were in the financial service industry at the time. At the time, we were called stockbrokers, right? And so the combination of finance, money management, the legal aspects of finance, the psychological impact of finance, which really appeals to me, that was what steered me towards starting at Merrill Lynch way back in the beginning.
So, I'm still staying on the topic of mentors, but have you had any advice from anyone in your life that has stuck with you in how you, I guess, operate or hold yourself when it comes to your professional life?
Sure. Oh, yeah, along the way. From aunt and uncle to parents, some teachers, some coaches, and then I think one that comes to mind that was when I was already starting to work for the Marriott Hotel Corporation. When I was 22, I was the youngest catering service sales manager in the chain of Marriott hotels, and I was, working 12 or 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, and the maitre d' told me at about 2:30 in the morning when I was marrying the whiskey bottles together and getting everybody to clean up the conference meeting of the day. And he said, "You'll never make it, kid." And so I think sometimes a reverse psychology of a mentor pushed me in some ways.
Yeah.
And so it just made me strive even harder, to work even harder. And I think I adopted that work ethic from my father as well. So
that goes back to the two words you mentioned earlier with patience and perseverance. you'd have to think about that, especially if someone's shouting at you and not wanting you to succeed. It can sure take you a long way if you persevere with it.
I think so. And then there have been others that were more encouraging as well, right? That helped me when I might have been discouraged along the way, right? Especially starting out in the financial services industry as a stockbroker, you eat what you kill, right? I mean, it's 100% commission situation. So there can be days when you're not eating, basically, because you're not killing anything. So a couple of managers that would take me under their wing were mentors to me to encourage me, to say, these are the things you need to do differently, and try to help you along the way.
Well, now that you host your own education programs for folks that have their CPA currently,
Yes.
right? And I know that's a continuing professional development. How do you find yourself continuing to learn to grow?
Oh, yeah. Well, I've always enjoyed that. Again, from my parents. I think my mom was an avid reader and loved history. And my dad didn't go to law school until he was in his 30s. And so I've always, along the way, I have just certification or license along the way to get into the business, and commodities license, futures, real estate, insurance, along with securities along the way, and then to become a certified financial planner. So I kind of, along the way, always have embraced the need to learn and the enjoyment and satisfaction of accomplishing the next certification or license to help me along my career. And I think I've been able to understand the CPA community and their specific needs for continuing education. Of course, they're required to have a certain number of hours. And so I've developed a lot of friendships over the years from giving good, consistent education, bringing in outside speakers, attorneys, and other CPAs and other professionals to come in and give them that education that they need. And so by doing that for them, it still inspires me to do even more. So it's a lifelong journey. One of the things that you talk about mentors, Ollie, I find golf and business and life parallel each other quite a bit. And Jack Burke, who won the Masters, has a golf club in Houston, Champions Golf Club, and he's always out there. And one of the things, you talk about being a mentor, he's always helping people out there. So it's an example of, I aspire to do that for folks, but he would always say, golf is a lifelong journey, not something that you conquer. It's a lifelong learning experience, a body of knowledge. And I think that applies to business, to relationships, to sports of any kind. So I have embraced that philosophy from him quite a bit.
Yeah, the art of giving back to the community or workspace or what have you. But yeah, that was something we've discussed with quite a few of our the people we've had on our podcast is they get to a certain point where they've absorbed so much from their learning, and now it's their turn to pass it on, and that's still a learning point for them. It's learning how to give back.
It is. It brings to mind too that everybody's different, but in my mind, I don't ever intend not to do some sort of work. People, retire at a certain age or want to retire early, let's say, but that doesn't mean that life stops either. So it can be another challenge or the next phase is all. And it doesn't have to be work. It can be something that you have a passion for and so forth. And so that's another way to give back as well. That could be the next step, right? And just like we talked about earlier, we've recently hired 2 very young associates, and that's my partner and I's effort to try to teach those folks and mentor them to come along and what goes around comes around.
And so when you're mentoring those younger folks, what avenues would you recommend that they use to continue being educated after they leave and graduate from university or college?
What avenues should they use? Well, that will depend on different disciplines and industries and where they're working and so forth. But within each industry, there's ways to get some continuing education that can further your career. And for some people, it might just be getting that next college degree, master's or beyond, and so forth. But I think that there's certainly ways to do some additional types of learning as well, not just a master's or another college degree. It would be industry specific, I think, and in learning, finding out what people in leadership have done ahead of you and maybe follow in their footsteps.
Does this, the lifelong learning side of things, it would still apply to you? You said it's a lifelong thing and you're still learning now. And is there something, since you've started your own business, is there any, I'm assuming you're still learning things as you're going along now?
Oh,
it's only a
absolutely.
recent development.
Yeah, it's opened up some additional avenues of learning because we now own our own business. So there's a lot of learning curves in that. And so both of us, my partner and I, are going to either seminars or attending webinars of one kind or another. We have affiliations with other certifications we have, Kingdom Advisors, the CFP, Certified Financial Planning Organizations, so forth, that offer us additional ways to develop our young business. And so certainly, maybe more so than ever. And maybe that's what's re-energized us too.
Yeah.
You know, we may have gotten to a point where we had plateaued somewhat, and now this has given us a springboard and an avenue to learn in some other ways.
On the topic of, I guess, osmosis, say throughout anyone's career, you can change jobs and you're managed by different people. All those managing styles can change, and you learn a lot from each individual who's mentoring you and coaching you. Is there a point where, when you switch managers or you maybe switch roles, and how you're taught beforehand can obviously change, and you may feel that I preferred how I was taught before, or how much do I take from my previous role into my new one, without it being that I'm possibly not, maybe a little bit stuck in the past of, I should be evolving of how I'm moving forward, how I'm going to be managed. So maybe I should be a bit more open to, new ways of learning, but the ways which I learned before helped me in that way that it's actually keeping me more motivated, but I want to keep some of that. So I guess in a way, how do you keep it all together, but also keep yourself open to learning from, people along the way?
Yeah, what that makes me think of is all the different managers I've had throughout my career that I have worked for, and their styles. Some you liked, some you didn't. Some were dictatorial, some were very much hands-on and helpful. So I think that along the way, it probably prepared me for the leadership role that I'm in now as a manager, and helped me understand what works and what doesn't, and how you have to adapt to different personalities. Maybe you can't manage or lead the same way for everybody, but I think it's about learning how somebody treats other people and where success can come from, and the different styles that make that happen. And so I think more than anything, I think looking back is now I feel like I've captured a lot of that along the way to help me develop my leadership style with the people I'm managing now.
Would you say as well, it's, I guess, a little bit, like building your own armor in a way of like what you have in your inventory. So it could be qualities, traits, skills from different people, keeping that in your own collection or library, and then in certain moments utilizing those, traits and whatnot, and that can help you along the way. But it's never that you'll forget about these things, but you might need them more often, or more so when you go further along, or you might look back and say, actually, I liked how they did that and I want to revisit that, but I want to build on it, I want to add to it. So in a way, things always, it's like a memory, it's always going to stick with you, and it can adapt. You may look back at it, and so you're evolving in a sense all the time.
I think that's accurate. I think that happens, and it's a lifelong body of knowledge, isn't it? Right? And so you are able to think back on what has worked and what hasn't.
Thank you.
And so earlier we mentioned that, you have a family, you enjoy playing golf all the time, you help others continue their education, you continue your education. So how do you find a balance with all the demand in your day-to-day?
Oh, yeah, well, that's a challenge and something that, for me, not everybody's the same, but for me it's routines and habits and trying to develop better and good habits and reduce the bad habits. And I've always been a student of time management as well. So that's where I think the balance can come in. And then priorities, right? You have to set priorities so that you do have some balance. And in order to perform better at work, you have to have that balance of, I think, spiritually, health-wise, mentally, physically, all aspects of life in order to have that balance. So you have to create, make sure you make time for all that stuff.
And so when you were first starting out, did you always have that time management routine going on, or did you have to learn your way into building your routine?
Oh, yeah. Well, how about college, right? Yeah. That's the worst time management of all time. For me it was, at least starting out. I learned my lesson fairly quickly when my dad cut me off from paying for the tuition and I had to pay for it all myself after I basically flunked out the first semester. So I learned my lesson pretty quick to get some time management. But I think that it's more discipline. And I've always admired the discipline that my father had. And so I think I've just adopted that, as part of my being.
If you had to give yourself, your younger self when you were first starting off, advice from what you know now, what would that be?
Take more risk. Be more generous with other people rather than being too self-centered. And I think that I would tell myself that don't worry so much about what other people think of you. Think about what the Creator thinks of you much more importantly. And I think that, don't be so scared and afraid. Be more bold and confident. So I think those 5 or 6 things, if I'd have told myself that when I was maybe 13, at least by 18, then things would be a lot better. In hindsight, I think you hear that from a lot of folks that are older, right? That they say.
Well, I guess risk taking is kind of a mindset that you have to get yourself into. And some people are natural risk takers, and others are much more scared to take that step. I guess there's something that I've always told by my partner of is this in your control, yes or no? And if I say no, and she goes, well, why do you worry about it then? there's nothing you can do.
Right.
That's it. It would help with making more risky decisions, but is there any way that you yourself can talk yourself into taking more risks, or do you just go for it, no thoughts?
Well, you do it within reason. Right? I'm not, jump off the cliff with wings or something, that kind of risk. But no, I think that, as an example, taking the risk of working as a W-2 corporate employee and taking that leap and challenging yourself is, so maybe not necessarily taking risk, but challenging yourself, I think is the way to look at it.
Instead of saying taking risks, I like to call it trading comfort for growth. So, you're applying yourself in order to be a better version of yourself. So that way you don't think of the negative aspects that come with risk. You're thinking more of how am I going to better myself for the future. So.
Say that again for me, Ari. I'm learning from you.
Trading comfort for growth.
Trading comfort for growth.
Yes.
I love that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that, looking back, you'd like to have maybe taken more risks, but you also mentioned that you were a stockbroker back in the day, and the 100% commission. And how is that not risky?
Yeah, how can I square that, right? Yeah. And especially since I'm basically conservative by nature as well. So, talking about balance earlier, here's another balancing act, right? I think that risk comes in different forms. And I think that it was not a situation where I would take my money or other people's money at risk. It was more of personally being at risk of being 100% on commission and taking the risk of having that type of a job that requires so much trust and responsibility. So that doesn't mean I'm taking risk with people's money. I think that it reels me in quite a bit to make sure that I understand how much risk people want to take with their money or not, and manage it accordingly. So that's a whole nother topic, I think, when we talk about the financial and money management part of the equation. Investment behavior psychology is really interesting to me, more than the math and computing part of the job that I do, because investment behavior psychology is really what drives the fear and greed, the supply and demand, the buy, the sell is really intriguing to me, and how people's decision making can become either irrational or rational depending on their emotions. And so we've done a lot of study and continuing education on this subject to help clients get through the decision-making process because of fear of losing money and so forth. So that's really drives me more than anything, is trying to understand the human emotion and impact that it has on our decision-making.
And you just mentioned emotion, and human emotion is something, a topic that we talk a lot about is AI. And I know you're quite interested in AI, and I guess, can you see AI having any impact in the financial world that you belong in? And I guess it won't have these emotional decision-making capabilities that humans have, or hindrance that humans may have. What do you see AI doing?
Yeah, I think it'll be helpful in the future. Financial technology and AI can lend a great impact on how maybe emotion can be taken out of the equation. However, you can't always trust what's coming from AI, as we've learned, and just because something is suggested from an AI large language model that comes down to maybe deciding what to buy or sell or invest in, the investment behavior psychology is completely different, because just because you're given that equation or that model to invest in doesn't mean somebody's going to stick with it when times are tough. Or recently, when only 7 companies are making all the money in AI in the stock market, and everybody flocks to those probably at the wrong time. So anyway, so there's still a lot of emotion involved, even though AI will be helpful in the future to the financial service industry, I think.
That's interesting. So that's just about all we have for today. I'm conscious of your time. Is there anything that you would like to leave us with? Any advice for people that are maybe looking to get started in your area of expertise?
Sure. I think that, again, I still like this idea of lifelong learning. The industry that I'm in offers that opportunity, so that's what attracted me to it. But for anybody in any industry, I think adopting that philosophy of I'm not finished, there's a lot more to learn, is very important.
So I'd like to say thank you for joining our show today. It's been great not only learning more about you, how you feel about lifelong learning, your career so far, and it's been nice just, having that active dialogue with you, and we hope to maybe have you again in the future on our show. So thank you for that, and thank you for our listeners, Open Comments community, who've been tuning into our podcast. And until next time, stay safe and happy listening. Thank you.